So the new Guardians of the Ancient Expanse has been announced, and it looks like we're getting Irelia, Malphite, and the officially confirmed yesterday Zilean. Let's face it, Legends of Runeterra was in dire need of a meta refresh, with aggro decks continuing to dominate once again. I can already tell Zilean's time bombs will be a big counter to many aggro decks, including Spider Aggro in particular. This new expansion is coming on May the 3rd, so we have one final week of patch 2.6, so I thought I'd create this final video to kind of have a look at the meta in the current expansion before it obviously massively shifts. This is Best Meta Decks patch 2.6. This video has been done in collaboration with BomberTV. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on the bell notifications too, so let's dive in. This is Discard Aggro, and it features cards from Noxus and Piltover and Zorn. And it's quite a unique deck in the sense it features 3 champions, but the main variation you'll see of this deck definitely includes Draven and Jinx, and these are obviously the 2 cards that are linked to the discard mechanic in one way or another. And it's a very typical aggro deck with lots of low costing cards. The deck plan is quite simple. Against slow decks, try to finish your opponent as early as possible before they get their endgame. Against aggro or mid-range decks, you can try and win the race against them to see who can finish faster, or you can go for the value approach granted by the leveled up Jinx. Of course, you need to first draw her and then level her up. As the name suggests, the deck is all around discarding, so cards which can be both discard and draw are very desirable, such as Zornite Urchin and Rummage. The deck has a lot of options, smart plays, and therefore is a very skill-based deck. First of all, it's always important to know when to discard a card and what ones you should be discarding altogether. For example, there are obvious discard targets such as Flame Chompers, Jury Rig, and Vision, and these are pretty straightforward what to discard. As for the when to discard a card, Jury Rig can be useful to summon a blocker or attack at burst speed, either punishing their open attack or to go in for the kill. The same goes for discarding Flame Chompers at burst speed, although it is much more useful to remove a big blocker so that your other units can basically go in and do what they need to do. Vision should be used to go in for the kill and take your opponent off guard, or to complete trades. This can almost be a win condition in some situations. With the new addition of survival skills, Discard Aggro seems to be getting a lot of love from Riot at the moment, and continues to be one of the best spots in the meta. Even if this list doesn't run survival skills, I would still suggest experimenting with it. Discard Aggro has been a staple in the meta for almost a year now, and it feels like we really need to tone down Draven in the same way they did with Fiora. This alongside a minor nerf to maybe a few of the discard themed cards should finally get rid of this deck, because let's face it, we're bored of seeing it. Here is another deck you'll definitely recognise. It's Pirate Aggro, featuring cards from Noxus and Bilgewater. It's an aggro deck with a very mixed mana cost, with several cards costing all the different mana costs from 1 to 5. It's quite an expensive deck to build, with 8 epic cards in total. The power cards here are Misfortune and Gangplank. Even if Misfortune will struggle to level up, she's here just a consistent way basically to level up Gangplank and make your board much more threatening on your attacking turns. Gangplank can then end the game against wide boards, and therefore making aggro mirror matches quite easy with this deck. This deck wants to develop a board early on, and you can do this with a very quick start to the game with burn cards such as Lieben Saboteur and Jagged Butcher. Afterwards, has a lot of ways to end the game with burn, with units like Imperial Demolitionist or Jack the Winner. Jack the Winner creates a Sleep with the Fishes each round, which deals 2 to an ally to deal 2 to the opposing Nexus. You also have Zap Spray Fin, which will be able to draw you a Noxin for Vor, always, as this is your only spell card with 3 or less mana, and this is obviously a fantastic card in this deck which can be very aggressive. If you reach late game, you can quickly close the game with Captain Farron and Decimate. Using the Overwhelming Captain Farron and the pure bird damage from Decimate will quickly reduce your opposing Nexus to 0. So overall this is a pretty solid deck and a very fast one too, so if you want to rank up quickly, this is definitely an option I recommend. Pirate Aggro receives a nerf to Captain Farron, but some deck lists of this Pirate Aggro archetype don't even include him. So even if they do, you're going to have such a strong aggressive opener with 2 Decimates that's probably going to be more than enough for this deck, so I'd say it's basically unchanged. Pirate Aggro is obviously an aggro aggressive deck, and when it's so early in an expansion, aggro decks like this one are always going to perform quite well, preying down on players experimenting with new unrefined strategies, so that's why loads of aggro decks are on this list. This version of Burn Aggro is a new quotation marks deck from the latest expansion, and is a variation of the archetype that was popular several months ago. The new cards just made it that little bit stronger, and we're yet to have a meta where Burn is dominating. It features cards from Noxus and Piltover and Zilean like before, and has Draven and Teemo in the deck. It's extremely cheap with 29 commons and no epics. This archetype is probably the simplest concept ever. To win the game, you must reduce the health of your opponent's Nexus from 20 to 0 as quickly as possible, and this deck does exactly that, and it does it fast as well. Start your game very aggressively. It's crucial to have a nice curve with particular care for 1-drops, even if it means you are more attacking. You should take every opportunity to deal cheap damage to your opponent's Nexus, so attack with cards with attack effects which burn even if these cards die in the process. So I'm talking about Legion Saboteur and Boom Crew Rookie here right at the beginning, which can help start your basically very aggressive start to the game. In a mirror game or against a board-centric decks, try to use used car salesman on the defensive turn. Summoning 3 units basically mean you're blocking their whole attack, giving you more time to burn them out later on. Don't keep your burn spells in your mulligan as you will naturally draw into them, and use them to close the game as fast as possible, so this applies to all your burn spells, including your cheapest ones like Mystic Shot, right up to Decimate. This deck includes Ballistic Bot and Aftershock from the latest expansion. Ballistic Bot generates an ignition every round which deals 1 damage to the opposing Nexus, and Aftershock deals 3 to anything or destroys a landmark. In this deck, use Aftershock to damage the opponent's Nexus. This deck first appeared in patch 2.16, so absolutely ages ago, and it's probably a deck that is in the meta simply because it requires less skill to be played than the Spider Aggro deck. And the kind of simplicity often leads to a faster game. It also makes it more friendly with beginners. It's a fairly budget deck, and this is probably why it's being used before players advance to Spider Aggro when they want something a little bit more complicated. This is Spider Aggro and features a nice 50-50 mix of Noxus and Shadow Isles. The deck is very follower heavy, featuring 28 followers in total and only 9 spells. If you look at the mana cost split in the bottom left, you will see that a mad amount of cards cost 3 or less mana. The only cards costing 3 or more is the 3 copies of Decimate that cost 5 mana. It's a very budget deck with 0 epics and 27 commons, making it great for beginners too. This deck is the essence of aggro. You want to deal as much damage as possible with the first 2 attacks of the game, as essentially your curve ends at 3 mana. This means against control decks you want to develop as much as possible without risking too much from the AoE, even though sometimes you've got to take the risk. But if they have a board clear, then good luck, but all decks have a counter. Legion Rearguard with 3 damage and Precious Pet with 2 damage, and the Fearsome, meaning that very few early game cards can actually block it, can help your very aggressive turns on 1 and 2, so you're going to be doing a lot of damage here. You can deal an insane amount of damage very early. For example, on turn 1 you can summon a Legion Saboteur for 3 damage. Turn 2 you summon a House Spider, who in turn summons a Spiderling 2 for an additional damage. And turn 3 you summon a Frenzied Skitterer for 11 damage in total, setting your opponent at 6 health by turn 3. So your games could be incredibly short if everything goes in favour here. Later on you can easily burn your opponents from low amounts of health with burn spells like Decimate, and burn units like Doom Beast. Decimate simply deals 4 damage to your opponent's Nexus, and Doom Beast drains 2 from your opponent's Nexus when summoned with Nightfall. So it's not only burns your opponent but can also help keep your Nexus healthy, because obviously you're going to be playing very aggressively, you need to survive as well. Stalking Shadow is a particularly strong card for the burn purposes, as effectively you can double your burn potential from units like Doom Beast, or simply copy cheap units to go very wide very effectively. For example, copy a Zilean Onlooker, who gains 2 damage and Fearsome on Nightfall, so this is a great unit for quick, easy 4 damage. I'm personally very happy to see Spider Aggro finally return to the meta in this form, but obviously it's got some new cards in it as well that make it a completely new deck, so I simply can't believe it's at the top. I probably feel like this is just because the meta is still settling, and obviously aggro decks typically do very well in new metas at the beginning, but it's nice to see it here, and this is the best one that's currently around in this patch. And there we go guys, you can't say I didn't warn you right at the start by saying aggro decks are truly still dominating the current meta. Let's hope Malphite and Irelia can kickstart a new meta, shifting away from these aggressive decks that we basically hate now. I guess Malphite will be landmark themed, and Irelia could bring a nice mid-range strategy to Iona. What do you think is the best deck in patch 2.6? I would love to hear in the comments. Up next is best new decks patch 2.7, Guardians of the Ancient, looking at the Zilean deck, Malphite deck and Irelia deck that you can use on day 1 in the new expansion. The data presented here is analysed by BomberTV using MOBA analytics. He's a Masters tier player with a background in game theory and game design. He took the most winning archetypes into Master tier, excluding ones with small play rates, analysed their key properties on why they are so strong. Link to his channel is in a pinned comment and in the card above. I've recently set up an Instagram account, @LoreGuides, and I'll be doing a giveaway shortly. Please follow this account for see posts about new videos, and will be in a chance of winning this giveaway. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on bell notifications too. See you next time guys.